The Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our ServiceNow series, where we interview the best and brightest of the industry to share their story, advice, and views on the exciting world of ServiceNow and digital transformation.
Hello everybody, it's Mark Kelly here, Chief Customer Officer and co-founder of Alldus. As part of our ServiceNow series, I'm very happy to welcome Briana Brown. Briana is VP of Tech and Innovation at Bayless Healthcare. Briana, thank you very much for your time today on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Briana, before we jump in to the podcast in a little bit more detail, it would be great to hear a little bit more about your background and your journey to now.
Yeah, absolutely. So in previous positions, I've been Director of Technology, Director of Performance and Process Governance, VP of CIO Services, and now VP of Technology and Innovation. Moving from Tennessee to Phoenix and loving the warm, sunny environment.
When you were looking at managing all those different roles, you must have developed a variety of different skill sets depending on the situation that you were working in. How did you get involved in ServiceNow and finding out a little bit about how that actually operated and what were your learns within that?
So I took on a position with a previous company that was related to how do we improve our performance in our department, but overall improve performance for the organization. The organization had grown really fast and really just needed some stability, a foundation. For me, going in and looking at processes is kind of like a puzzle. I love processes. If you ever want to distract me, talk about a process, and that's where I'm going to go. But as I started digging in and really getting into the weeds of our processes or lack of processes in a lot of areas, I realized that in order for us to be efficient, we needed a tool, we needed a solution, we needed something that was going to help us move faster, work smarter, and really collaborate and be transparent. IT has a history, and this isn't just my previous company, it's anywhere. IT has a history of losing trust because we're not always transparent. And it's not intentional. I think IT just, we work fast and we keep our head down and we forget that communication is really important. We forget that collaboration is really important. So for me, looking at the tool sets that we had, I knew it wasn't going to get us to where we needed to be. Yes, we could implement processes. Yes, we could do training and go through the whole change management process, organizational change management. But without something to really help drive it, we weren't going to make the progress that we needed to. And ServiceNow was that platform.
Yeah, I think it's a good point because sometimes within IT and you're ready to drive to an implementation, but you also have to remember that the person who's going to be part of it, who's not involved in IT, this is a new journey for them. You have to be ready for them to actually acknowledge it and go through that process too, which can take time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why did you think that ServiceNow was the platform of choice, and why is it so popular?
I'm a little bit of a geek at heart. So looking at ServiceNow and seeing all of the possibilities, I mean, yes, it's obviously a great IT service management platform and it meets all of the ITIL processes that you want to implement, but it goes beyond that. And even though it's a SaaS product, typically with SaaS, you really can't do much with it. They kind of control the environment and you may get to turn a few widgets or configure a couple of things, but not the whole platform. And with ServiceNow, it really let us develop in it. It gave us a safe space to develop. We've had on-premise solutions before, and if you get in there and start developing and you start breaking everything, there's nobody there to help support you and bring it back together. At least with ServiceNow, we had some parameters, some guardrails, and we could go and develop from there. And it was really, for us, we treated it like anything was possible.
Which is a fantastic way to look at it, because if you just look at it as from a ticketing point of perspective, or if you look at it more of a kind of a day-to-day operations rather than strategic, you're going to look to have maybe you're not really going to maximize the opportunity.
Absolutely.
So when you actually look at implementing ServiceNow and some of the benefits that came across within the organization, how did you actually go about measuring that?
Well, so I'm probably going to answer a couple of different things in one kind of ball. As we were looking at the entire platform and we were looking at what do we want to accomplish first, we also had to pay attention to, and you actually mentioned it, people outside of IT are a little leery. They don't really know what they don't know. And so we thought, if we're going to go live with ServiceNow, let's pick something that impacts IT and not necessarily the entire environment yet. Let's prove that this works. And so we went with service management and a few of the ITIL processes, things like change management, problem management, some of the more common practices. We built our processes first. We built the tool to make it efficient on top of that. And then we really worked closely with all of our IT departments to train and gain their trust, get their adoption. And then from there, we just kind of started layering on. So we went there and then built in dashboards and reports and transparency so that the people outside of IT could kind of start to get a feel for what could be possible. And we started gaining their trust and we started improving our delivery. And then from there, we just kept moving into other areas and it gave us traction rather than us feeling like we were shoving it down somebody's throat.
Yeah, if anybody's ever read the small book "Who Moved My Cheese," change is hard. It's just difficult. We kind of like our comforts, we like our kind of routines. There's an awful lot about why we enjoy that process. So if you take into consideration what the initial response of stakeholders was regarding the implementation, how did you manage to roll out and changing the process across the board? And what things were you taking into kind of consideration while you were doing that?
So when we started with IT, once we started involving IT leadership and their teams, because obviously not everybody reported to me, so this was not a situation where I could go in with authority and say, "Let's do this." It was a situation where I had to go in and say, "Okay, how can I help you? Let's build this so that it makes sense for all of us." So as we started gaining the IT adoption and buy-in and trust, really, it really boils down to trust. Then as we started expanding, it was really meetings, patience. I think a lot of times IT wants to move really, really fast and let's hurry up and get it done and then let's call it a win. We couldn't do that. This was really about let's baby step this, let's help people understand because again, a lot of our processes were on paper and they were very manual. And so we're coming in and saying, "Hey, we can make this easier for you." Well, they had no reason to believe that. So we had to really collaborate. We had so many meetings around, just getting buy-in, and then we would have another meeting to get the same buy-in that we just got last week, just to make sure everybody was still on board again. So I would say, patience, getting people's trust, and moving at the pace that everybody can accept it. Don't move at the pace that you put in your project timeline.
Hey, that's a good, and it kind of allows me to ask my next question is, what are the characteristics of the right team members? Because having the right team in place for an implementation, I'm guessing, is very, very important.
It is. I had an amazing team, really amazing team. And not even just the people that, reported to me and were working in this project with me, but even the people we were collaborating with. It was fantastic. For me, I needed a very diverse team. I needed the cheerleaders on the team that were happy and excited and ready to document and talk about things and get people happy and excited about this, the energy. And then I needed people that were very methodical and really thinking through the process, making sure we didn't have gaps in it, really making sure that whatever we built out in the tool was going to match our desired outcome, whatever that process was going to be. Um, and then patience, needing people who are okay with over communicating, okay with breaking down the information into small bits. Um, I needed people who were critical thinkers and analytical. My testing and release management team, they were phenomenal. We spent weekends coming in as a group and doing user acceptance testing and really making sure that what we were going to put in production was solid. Um, it was a mix of people. If I had had one group of one type of people, I would have never been successful.
So having that diversity of thought, different people coming together and bringing them together. Tell us about some of the roadblocks that you'd encountered or maybe underestimated during the implementation.
I would say probably one of the biggest ones, and this is typical, especially probably in healthcare, asset management. I think we go in and we think we know where all of our assets are and how we're managing it and what we're doing with it. But as you start really digging in and you really look at what the tool can do for us, and we're going, well, we don't know half these answers. We don't know how to fill in this information, and so we went into it, and I think there was a leadership push, rightfully so. I get it. Asset management's critical, but there was a push to move really, really fast and to be successful immediately. And I think my advice to other people would be, first of all, do your research. Really make sure you understand it, whether it's asset management or something else. It may be something else that's more challenging for someone. But really get into the weeds, really inspect it. Don't take somebody at face value if they say, "Oh, I know where all the assets are," or "I know, where everything works." Don't take that at face value. Really inspect, really understand what your current state is before you commit to something. And if you're getting pressure to speed up or move fast or be excellent day one, don't be afraid to say no. Don't be afraid to push back and say, "Hey, look, this is a process. This is a journey. Day one is going to look like a baby step. You know, 6 months later is going to look like, I'm starting to walk a little bit. And maybe 12 months later, I'm actually jogging some. It's a maturity growth process. And we as leaders have to be okay with pushing back and saying, no, we're not going to be successful if we do it your way.
And you also need quite a bit of confidence to say no,
Yes.
because there's a real tide for action, a real tide for getting things done, and a real tide for, don't be blocking this because we want to see progress. But being, process driven and understanding that if you don't have the right systems in place, you can you can already kind of see the challenges of what's coming down the track, and you ultimately and the team will probably take the flak.
Yes.
So actually having that inner strength to say, no, actually, this is the process. This is what we're going to try to do, and this is our roadmap for delivery. Um, yeah, it's one of those that may sound pretty straightforward, but as everybody wants to move things forward, you don't want to be always seen as the person that's trying to dot the T's and I suppose stop the fun.
Yeah.
Or wouldn't it be cool, Snare? Projects that can be very, very detrimental to businesses that don't generate enough income and outcomes too. When we look back, and if you're maybe offering advice to yourself pre-implementation and to future ServiceNow users that are listening to this podcast, what advice would come to mind?
I think I think the first thing would be build the right diverse team before you start your planning, before you start your implementation. Even if they don't all report to you, figure out who in the company could meet that role. You want your cheerleaders, you want your critical thinkers, you want your analytical people, methodical people. You want your process leaders, people who really understand process. Um, I would advise to be flexible, because as you start going into this and you start learning more about your processes and the gaps in your processes, your timeline may slip a little bit. Your end state may change from what you thought it was going to be. Be okay with it shifting a little bit because you're learning as you're going. I don't think there's a single person out there that can say they know through and through every single detail of a process and every single gap in that process. Building ServiceNow gives you a chance to learn every single piece of it. So be a little flexible with yourself. Give yourself the option to shift your vision, to collaborate and really hear other ideas, because the way you think it should work, somebody may walk into the room and point out a hole, a gap that it's really not going to work that way, and here's why. And you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with shifting that. And I think for some people that's kind of hard. You set a vision in your head, you set a timeline in your head, and it's kind of, I'm sticking to this. I don't care what anybody else says. You just can't go into it like that.
Yeah, that's great advice because, I remember being younger and being, if people challenged me like that, or perceived it as being challenged, I got defensive or I felt it was personal. But when you look at it as what's the best business outcome, what's going to help the business be stronger, what's going to help the business be successful, how are we going to drive this? It's making sure that everybody feels comfortable questioning, being curious, debating,
Yeah.
speaking their mind rather than agreeing and putting their arms up and kind of, that they're not really, they don't necessarily want to go on that journey. And that's also about creating a culture of that, because people may not feel that that's instinctive of the culture that they're in. So they're probably going to set the type rather than actually being mindful of, trusting. I suppose trust comes back, trusting that you can actually have this open dialogue too, as well. So that's fantastic advice too. And thank you very much for your time. You've been listening to the Alldus podcast as part of our ServiceNow series. I'm very, very happy to say that we've been chatting with Briana Brown. Briana is VP of Tech and Innovation at Bayless Healthcare. And Briana's been telling us a little bit about ServiceNow implementations and how forming the right team was a massive part of the implementation and also trusting the process as well. Briana, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.